Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger has sent significant shockwaves not just across Africa, but also throughout the Western world. This unity represents a bold assertion of sovereignty and self-determination that challenges decades of Western influence and exploitation in the region. For years, these Western powers have heavily relied on these countries for strategic resources and geopolitical advantages, often at the expense of local populations. Now, as this newfound alliance strengthens, the West finds itself increasingly alarmed. The inability to reassert control over Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger has revealed the true intentions and priorities of these foreign powers. The West's initial reaction to this shift in power dynamics was one of denial, but as the reality set in, their approach became more aggressive. In a display of their true colors, Western leaders and institutions have begun openly discussing the possibility of military intervention, particularly in Niger, which recently took the bold step of expelling U.S. troops from its territory. This rhetoric of invasion underscores the desperation and frustration of these powers as they grapple with the loss of influence in a region they once dominated. Niger is at the center of a decisive anti-imperialist revolution that began with the coup of July 27, 2023, which brought President Abdourahmane Tiani to power. Under Tiani's leadership, the Nigerian government has taken unprecedented steps, declaring the U.S. military presence illegal and ordering the immediate expulsion of U.S. troops. This bold move makes Niger the first country in history to expel U.S. Africa Command, AFRICOM forces, a clear message that Niger will no longer tolerate foreign military domination. But Niger hasn't stopped there. The government has also expelled French troops, another symbol of lingering colonial influence, and has begun nationalizing critical sectors of its economy, revoking French licenses. These actions represent a dramatic shift toward reclaiming national sovereignty and signal a broader rejection of foreign control, resonating with growing anti-imperialist movements across Africa. Unsurprisingly, these decisive actions have provoked anger from U.S. politicians. Representative Matt Gaetz has gone as far as to label the Nigerian leadership as third world thugs, clearly outraged by the loss of the U.S. Air Force's most expensive construction project in Africa, Niger Air Base 201. This drone base, the largest in Africa, represented a significant U.S. investment of roughly $250 million to build and operate, with an additional $500 million poured into military activities in Niger. The closure of this base is not just a financial blow, it's a strategic defeat for U.S. military interests in the region.
We know that Russians are behind the wire. You know what a real U.S. president would do? Say that C-130s are on their way to Niger today with the water and the medicine and the food our troops need, that they will have a full fighter pilot escort there. And if the Nigerian government or any other third world thug tries to even turn on their air defense systems, we should show those leaders and those thugs what the target package looks like on their houses and their family members, because it should not be Americans that are suffering because President Biden and Blinken are so embarrassed that their strategy in Africa failed that they're willing to let Americans' conditions deteriorate.
As the U.S. is forced out of Niger, it appears to be seeking a new foothold in West Africa, this time in Ivory Coast. Reports from Le Monde indicate that the U.S. has secured permission to establish a military base in the village of Odiene, near the borders of Mali and Burkina Faso. This location is of strategic importance, suggesting a calculated effort by the U.S. to maintain its military influence in the region, despite the setback in Niger. This move has not gone unnoticed by neighboring countries. Burkina Faso's President Ibrahim Traoré has publicly accused foreign powers of plotting to destabilize his country, pointing to a center of operations in Abidjan, the capital of Ivory Coast. His government is actively tracking a cell, allegedly operated by Western intelligence agencies, which he asserts is directed against Burkina Faso. These developments unmistakably point to a strategic realignment by the U.S. in West Africa, with Ivory Coast potentially becoming the new hub for U.S. military operations in the region. The consequences of this shift for regional stability and the broader anti-imperialist struggle are profound and will likely define the geopolitical landscape in West Africa for years to come. You see, the revolutions sweeping across the Sahel are sparking a new wave of determination among Africans, with Niger standing out as a prime example. Niger's leadership took a bold step by expelling French and U.S. soldiers and tearing up exploitative mineral contracts. The results speak for themselves. A staggering 12.8% economic growth rate, as reported by the World Bank, making Niger the third fastest growing economy in the world and the fastest in Africa. If you're wondering how Niger pulled this off following a military coup, let me break it down for you. So how did Niger's economy explode after kicking Western troops off their land? The answer is straightforward. Niger took control of its resources. The junta raised the price of uranium, a resource that has been ruthlessly exploited by foreign powers for far too long. The previous regime had settled for a disgraceful 5% royalty on uranium sales, an insult to the wealth of Niger. This revelation aligns with claims made by the late Wagner PMC's head, Yevgeny Prigozhin, who exposed how French companies were selling uranium at $200 per unit, but only giving $11 to Niger. But get this, the real figures show Niger was actually receiving as little as $0.80 per unit. It's scandalous. For those who might not grasp the full magnitude of this situation, what the Nigerian junta has done is nothing short of a modern-day revolution. This is exactly what Muammar Gaddafi did in Libya. After World War II, Libya was handed to France and the UK, with the British propping up the corrupt Senussi dynasty under King Idris. This so-called monarchy was nothing more than a puppet, with the British siphoning off Libya's wealth while leaving the people destitute. When Gaddafi overthrew this monarchy in 1969, he expelled the foreign powers and nationalized Libya's oil wealth. He turned the tables, ensuring that Libya's resources benefited Libyans, not colonial powers. The results were undeniable. Libya went from being one of the poorest nations in the world in 1969 to a regional economic powerhouse by 2011. The UNDP recognized Libya as a high-development country in the Middle East and North Africa by 2010. Literacy rates skyrocketed from dismal single digits to 88.4%, and life expectancy soared to 74.5 years. This is what happens when a nation has the courage to reclaim its resources and refuses to be exploited. Niger is on the brink of a similar transformation. By renegotiating its uranium deals and severing dependence on European and Western buyers, Niger is positioning itself as the next economic powerhouse in the Sahel. This is not just possible, it is inevitable if Niger continues down this path. Niger must be supported without hesitation in this journey. With the right backing, Niger will emerge as a modern Libya in the Sahel, using its resources to uplift its people and reshape its destiny. The time for half measures is over. Niger is leading the charge, and Africa must rally behind it. The tension between the United States and Niger stems from the latter's recent decision to expel American forces from its territory. To understand this, it's essential to look at the reasons Niger provided for this drastic measure, as outlined in a video they released a few months ago. The video opens with a clear statement on the nature of international cooperation between sovereign states. It emphasizes that the foundation of any bilateral cooperation, such as the one between Niger and the United States, must be rooted in the mutual interests of both nations. These interests should be explicitly detailed in a protocol signed by both parties. However, Niger asserts that this has not been the case in their cooperation with the United States. The video criticizes the lack of transparency in formal agreements, claiming that since 2012, the people of Niger have been left to question what benefits, if any, they have derived from the presence of American military and civilian personnel on their soil. It suggests that instead of a formal agreement, the cooperation has been governed by a vague verbal note, which lacks any real substance in terms of protecting Niger's interests. One of the key grievances expressed is the refusal of the American forces stationed in Niger to share critical intelligence, such as the coordinates of terrorist bases that pose a daily threat to the security of Niger. This refusal, the video argues, undermines the very purpose of their presence, which is supposedly to support Niger in combating terrorism. Additionally, Niger raises concerns about the financial burden imposed on them by the U.S. military presence. It is pointed out that Niger has been forced to bear the cost of taxes related to American military aircraft, a responsibility that, in Niger's view, should fall on the United States. Moreover, unlike in other countries where the U.S. pays for the use of military bases, such as in Djibouti, where they reportedly pay around $63 million annually, the U.S. pays nothing to Niger for stationing its forces there. The video goes further, accusing the United States of violating international principles, specifically the 1945 San Francisco Charter on non-interference in the internal affairs of sovereign states, and the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which upholds the right of nations to self-determination. Niger argues that the U.S. has disregarded these principles by attempting to dictate Niger's choice of international partners and by assuming that Niger should automatically share its enemies. In conclusion, the video presents these points to argue that Niger has not benefited from the cooperation agreement with the United States, which they describe as a fool's bargain. The message culminates with a quote from Brigadier General Abdurrahman Tiani, who bluntly states, "We are no one's fags," symbolizing Niger's determination to end what they perceive as a one-sided and exploitative relationship.